Last break on this second day at the Humans to Mars Summit in Washington, D.C. That panel that I teased you with about a half hour ago is ready. Janet Ivey, the president of Explore Mars, is down on stage with all those folks who live at the intersection of art and science. And so we're ready to send it down to you, Janet.
Thank you so much, Matt, and thanks to everybody watching. Thank you to my virtual guests, Bert, Tamara, and Dr. José, Morey. I am joined on stage with some Sid Blue, AJ Trauth, and Rob Cooper. But let me tell you a little bit about them, and then we're going to dive into this concept of STEM and entertainment. Sid Blue is author of Fly Girls. She's written, edited, and produced for TV stations, production companies, national magazines. She has an award-winning documentary, local TV shows. Her tween books have made Amazon top 1% on her read in middle schools, along with her STEM curriculum. 2 scripts that she presently has are in development with top producers who garnered over $1 billion at the box office. So we can't wait to hear about that. AJ Trauth is the vice president of kids entertainment at Multimedia. He also starred as Alan Twitty on the hit Disney series Even Stevens before becoming an independent producer. He's developed a slate of scripted series in the kids and family space, including The Fourth Stall with Walden Media. And currently at Multimedia, he helps identify opportunities with top showrunners, writers, and on-screen talent to develop kids scripted projects. So he always wants those projects to have dynamic characters, rich in story, and bold in execution. Next to him is Robert Cooper, a Canadian writer and producer best known for his work in the Stargate franchise. If anybody's mad that you never met the Furlings, that's the guy to talk to. And he was formerly... He unapologetically did not apologize for never letting us see the Furlings. He was formerly an executive producer of Stargate SG-1, Stargate Atlantis, and Stargate Universe. He also co-created both Stargate Atlantis and Stargate Universe with Brad Wright. On the screen there is Bert Ulrick, who acts as NASA's liaison with the entertainment community and oversees NASA's participation in entertainment-oriented projects. He collaborates closely with studios and producers and production companies. And get this, he oversees over 100 documentaries annually. Bert, you're an amazing mind. And so if you've ever seen films like Ad Astra, First Man, Hidden Figures, Tomorrowland, The Adventures, and many more, Bert has consulted on those. Thank you so much for being here. I met this fabulous lady a few years back at an H2M summit. Tamara Krinsky. She is an actress, a writer, on-air correspondent, an interactive media producer. Her on-camera hosting work feeds her eternal curiosity. She is Marvel's red carpet host. You see her all the time on the red carpet. Co-host of Tomorrow's World Today on Discovery and the Science Channel, where they profile the latest and greatest upcoming technology. I watch her on her Instagram account, and I am slightly jealous sometimes of the places you get to go tomorrow. Welcome and thank you. Dr. José Morey. If you haven't seen Dr. Intergalactic and all of that, you are missing out, so check that out. He's the founder of Ad Astra Media, providing role models and educational STEAM content to encourage more diversity. And again, you got to check out his comic, Dr. Intergalactic. It is available in English and Spanish. He's the Chief Medical Officer for Ever Medical, an Eisenhower Fellow, is a health and technology keynote speaker, author, and a consultant for NASA, Forbes, MIT, and is part of the White House Office of Science and Technology. He is considered a leader in exponential technology innovation. He is Dr. Intergalactic. That's what this bio sounds like. And his latest essay, The Future Shock of Medicine, How AI Will Transform Disease, Death, and Doctors, is not to be missed. And so I am so grateful to have all of these fine people. Will you please put your hands together for these esteemed colleagues? So first up today, we're going to turn it over to author Sid Blue, and she's going to talk about her work, her books, and take it away, Sid.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to this awesome summit. I've learned so much about Mars. I'm excited. One of my main goals is just to encourage kids to step up and take on a challenge. such as learning to fly, because the journey is so empowering. It was for me. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what happened with my life when I went STEM. To sustain STEM, aviation, and our space ambitions, we need to get kids into those fields, but there are specific deterrents to STEM. And no, I'm not talking about money. That's a natural problem, but there are answers that people don't know about except when you really get in there and talk to kids and see what's a specific psyche problem that's a barrier to STEM. And how to get around that and help them actually be interested in soaring. So next slide, please. When I speak to kids at schools and air shows and on my YouTube channel, they write to me and they ask me questions, and they ask me the same question over and over. Can you guess what the #1 question kids ask me about flying? I'll let you think about that for a minute, because I want to tell you first about how media influences careers, especially in STEM. Did you know that Top Gun 1 caused a 500% increase in recruitment for the US Navy in the year following the movie's release? Thank you for forwarding the slide, you got it. STEM careers are made up of 33% women, yet on screen the ratio is 15-1. But these shows that do present the STEM careers have a significant impact. You may have heard of the CFI effect, which refers to the huge spike in women's enrollment into accredited forensic science programs in the US in the mid-2000s, in line with the emergence of popular TV shows of women as scientists in such shows as CSI, Bones, and Crossing Jordan. And in 2012, we saw an increase of almost 103% in the number of young women who took up competitive archery because of Brave and the Hunger Games. Such an impact. So when children are engaging with media up to 7 hours a day, they're consuming massive amounts of unconscious bias in programming. So we are creating the future with what people see now, today. Next slide, please. Currently, we still have an image problem. Most stereotypes of STEMers on TV, the US robotic team is a bunch of nerds. But when you have a character like Abby on NCIS, she's so popular. So when you break out of that stereotype, it's popular. So why not think about that more? I think we just need to bring that to our consciousness and think about that bias. When I gave a STEM keynote at California State University, San Bernardino, a girl came up to me from the audience and said that after reading, she'd been trying to get her boyfriend to become a pilot, but after reading Fly Girl, she's going to do it. Yay! And I've heard from other kids who have said they've gone on to genetic engineering or astronomy after reading Circles. So I'm so excited because that's my whole goal, is to get more kids into this pipeline, and I'll talk about why in a second. But along with the dearth of characters that are more concerned about the perfect landing rather than the perfect lipstick, there's another problem. Next slide, please. This problem goes back to the #1 question that kids ask me about flying. So what do you think that question is?
Anybody here in the front? I see some fabulous students. Anybody got an idea to Sid's question?
All right, I'll tell you.
All right, they're shy today.
Is flying hard? Isn't that interesting? Why is that the #1 question they ask me? It tells you a lot about society, and that they think they only want easy things to do. They think they can't accomplish something hard. So I tell them that pilots, or really any professional, uses a different word than hard. We call it a challenge, because it is hard, but we know we can do it. So that's in part why I wrote Fly Girl, to show that you can overcome challenges. And Fly Girl actually makes it worse on herself by making huge, cringe-worthy mistakes, but she overcomes them. So we go with her on our journey to overcoming that and becoming a pilot. And next slide, please. Actually, 80% of student pilots don't even finish their pilot's license. And there's specific reasons for that tie in with what is a barrier to going into STEM. And again, that ties back into kind of the earlier psychology before you get into the STEM pipeline of just thinking that whether or not you're capable of actually accomplishing something hard. So if we can get to that heart first, then we can help them get on a STEM path. So I put some of these stories and from my flying and other pilots into FlyGirl to give them examples about sticking with something hard. And kids were telling me things like, I want to fly so bad, but my parents say I'm too stupid, or I'm not good at math, or they all have these excuses. And so I think it's so important for us in our stories that we create for kids to show them that they can, and if they just have that inspiration for determination to conquer any goal. When I got into a STEM field, my career really took off, pun intended. For me, it was a process. I wasn't a STEMmer until long after I graduated, because I was an English major. And then where I landed surprised me, because being a pilot wasn't even on my radar. I had no idea that's where I was going to end up. But then once I did, I ended up flying 10 times more than the average pilot, as I was a chief pilot at an aerial surveillance company protecting national security assets. So that was a lot of fun, and STEM has really changed my life, and I'm so grateful. Similarly, many students fall into these traps. The New York Times reported that tough classes and lower grades cause many to simply give up and go to the humanities for higher grades. Next slide, please. The Washington Post said, it's possible that would-be engineers simply want to have an easier time in college, even if it means a harder time getting a job afterward. And then the next slide, please. That might be why we see numbers like this. The US ranked 21 out of 23 countries in math and 17 out of 19 countries in problem solving, according to the US News and World Report. And USA Today said the findings from the US Department of Education add a new urgency. Next slide, please. The US Educational Department said numeracy, problem solving, and literacy are below the international average and far below the top performers. Next slide. Here you can see the US in the middle of the pack of the world in these years. So why STEM? Next slide, please. From kids of all backgrounds, it can change the trajectory of their entire family. According to payscale.com, 7 out of 8 of the top paying occupations with only a bachelor's degree were STEM related, and 5 were engineering. Next. Georgetown University reported over a lifetime the earnings of workers who have majored in engineering, computer science, or business are as much as 50% higher than the humanities, the arts, education, and psychology. I know this firsthand. I was an English major in college, but I have become a science student in life. Next, please. Do you think it's weird or cool that genetic engineers are putting spinach genes into pigs to try to make ham healthier to eat? Because heaven forbid we'd eat spinach. Because my book Circle explores this in a Mars secret, it's used as a discussion starter in middle schools for concepts relating to genetic engineering and astronautics, etc., just to pique interest in STEM, because even English class is tasked with including science because of the STEM educational edicts. It needs to carry over now to TV and movies, and teachers love assigning a movie as homework if there's a book to read in class. So learning a little bit about science while developing literacy is a great combo. Next, please. Which brings me to one last question. Why don't you think the number one thing kids ask me is flying dangerous? Yes? Mm-hmm. That's a great answer. I'm going to ask you later if you've flown. It's because they love the life and death element, like Hunger Games. They want it to be live or die. And when you're competing with Fortnite and a ton of streaming services, You've got to make it soar or die, or they'll tune out for something more exciting. So we can raise the stakes in ordinary science. When I was in severe turbulence and the plane was stalling every second, I had to just keep bringing it back to level. There's nothing to do when you're in severe turbulence like that in a tiny little airplane. Or in other situations that were crazy when I was learning to fly, there were often times that I wanted to quit. I wanted to stay in the nice, safe ground or go into my writing cave and not come out until spring. But I wanted to develop my confidence more, so I kept at it. So I listened to The Danger Zone from Top Gun and psyched myself up and then got into a little flying contraption, a feat of engineering, and I learned something. And then I ended up, like I said, flying 10 times more than the average pilot. So it's possible. If I can do it, you can do it. Just to dig down deep. So that's what I try to encourage kids to do, to step up and take on a challenge, because the journey is empowering, and empowerment is the gateway to STEM, and STEMers change the course of humanity. STEMers are the creators of the world, really. Next slide, please, last slide. So you can hear from the middle school students on my website. There's a little video, 1-minute video. But here's basically what I've learned from them. Keep breaking those stereotypes in entertainment. Don't be afraid to raise the stakes and create content that can cross over to the classrooms.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We've got many questions for all of you, but I'm going to now go to one of our virtual guests. Bert, why don't you talk about what you do for NASA and maybe one of your top 3 favorite projects that you've consulted on?
Oh, goodness. Yeah, so I work at NASA as the liaison for the film and TV community. And we work on a lot of projects. We worked on over 198 projects, documentary projects last year. And we invite filmmakers and producers and screenwriters and the whole industry actually to participate in inviting NASA to participate in their production that deal with space exploration. So some of my favorite projects, I think one of my favorite films is Hidden Figures, which we worked on. And that was an amazing experience. And it's a story that just keeps on really like spilling love around the world. And we do a lot with that movie. We recently named the street in front of NASA Hidden Figures Way. We named the NASA headquarters the Wanda Jackson Building after Wanda, who was one of the hidden figures. And it's just really a wonderful, or Mary Jackson, not Wanda, excuse me. There's a weird reverberation. Are you hearing that, or is it just
it's slight on our end, I think but you're coming through loud and clear for us.
Okay, good. I just hear my voice coming back. It's strange. Anyway, it's Mary Jackson, not Wanda. Wanda's her granddaughter. But also, we just work on a lot of projects, and we're really excited to work on them. We do require that people have their distribution and funding in place, just because we're beholden to taxpayers. We need to have a guaranteed audience. But given that, when we review a treatment or a script, we often participate in productions. So it's a really wonderful way to reach out to the public. And I have to honestly say, it's a very exciting time for the agency right now.
Well, we're going to come back to you with more questions. Now I'm going to go to AJ Trauth to tell the audience a little bit about your background as an actor. So you come at it in a different way, but to be the VP of Kids Entertainment, tell us a little bit about that path and why you're so committed to kids entertainment and STEM being part of that.
Yeah, well, so starting as a young person, it was very clear in my mind that I wanted to work on a kids show. That was the goal that I had. So I found myself working in that capacity, working for Disney Channel as a young performer. And that was 24 years ago now, and I've been in kids and family entertainment ever since.
Wow.
Which is incredible to have that level of tenure in a very specific lane in our industry. And I'm grateful to be on this side of the camera now, creating stories for young audiences and to I do come at it from a slightly different angle, having been an actor and been on that side of the camera. When it comes to story and working with writers and things like that, I am approaching it ever so slightly differently than a typical development executive might.
How so? Can you elaborate on that? Or is it just like, this speaks to me, or?
I think it's thinking from the end in mind in the development process. So ultimately, there's going to be an actor on a set having learned their lines, and the cameras are going to roll, and there are certain things that the actor needs in that moment to be able to do their job well and create something compelling, ultimately that will be captured on camera. And thinking with that end in mind at the very beginning of the process does tend to help.
I love that. So for all of my art-loving, actor-loving people out there, you can love your art and your science. It worked for Da Vinci. He let his art inform his science inform his art. So please never shy away from blending your creativity along with your love of science. Which brings me to my friend Tamara Krinsky. Can you talk, my dear, about all that you're doing as a writer and producer and co-host of Tomorrow's World Today?
Sure. So Tomorrow's World Today is a show. We're in our 5th season on Discovery Channel and Science Channel. And we travel around the country and the world, especially now that things are opening up again, safety-wise. And we talk with companies about what they are doing in the research and development space to either use new technology to have more sustainable businesses, or the way that they are changing up what I'll call legacy industries to have a better, greener future. And for me, as a storyteller, I'm an actress and a performer, and similarly to AJ, like, I think about what are the things that makes a good story? What are the things that I as an actor look for when I am needing to convey whatever the ideas are? And I've always had a passion for science. I've always had a passion for STEM. I grew up with very lovely parents who let me blow things up in my kitchen with a Bunsen burner, or wake me up at 2 in the morning to go outside and watch eclipses. And my interest in science was kindled by stealing the Isaac Asimov books off my dad's bookshelf. So I never ran into that thing that says girls should not be in STEM. I ran into the situation where they said, well, either you're a math and science person or you're an artsy English person. And I believed that for a really long time. Then I went to school for theater. I was performing, but I kept finding myself gravitating towards stories that had STEM at the center. So I wrote a one-person show about stem cell research. I started writing and becoming involved in projects that dealt with astronomy and space travel. And eventually I realized that no, these things do not have to be separate. I can combine all of my passions into the way that I move through my professional life. So several years ago, I co-founded a group called Sirens, which is a play on screen sirens for science. And we are a creative team that focuses on using entertainment as an on-ramp to science literacy in the general public. Of course, we have a lot of support for women and girls in STEM, and we've talked a lot today about kids and the importance of bringing kids into the STEM pipeline, but I also think there's a real case to be made for storytelling and how that brings adults into the world of STEM, because the reality is science and technology touches every facet of what we do every day, whether it's the choices we make when we go into the grocery store about, are we gonna buy something made of plastic or of metal or a more sustainable material, who we vote for. We all hold devices in our hands that are more powerful than anything they use to send people to the moon. So we need to be informed about these. And for some people, it's much easier to go and watch a movie like Interstellar and be like, oh, black holes, that's kind of cool. And then go home and look that up, and suddenly you're down the rabbit hole on the internet learning about something you never might have imagined you'd be interested in. So I've seen firsthand how the power of story can act as that on-ramp.
You know what, I love that, because I think for anybody who is space curious or sort of on the fringes of like, could I be interested in this, there might actually be an entry point there when we develop great stories along with pulling people along for the science ride. I'm going to go now to Rob Cooper, who again was the writer and has worked a lot on Stargate. Tell us a little bit about your process. You got started very early as a writer. I think that's curious. And why was space and science, was that always a part of your loves as well?
Sure. I mean, growing up, my favorite show was The $6 Million Man.
All right.
I big Steve Austin fan over there. Did you have the doll? I had the doll. Oh yeah, do you look through the eye? Yeah, you look through the eye. Make the sound when you do it. I mean, I think, I grew up with a physical condition, and I think that show probably resonated with me because it was like I wanted to be biomechanically fixed or engineered, and I think that when we take an interest in technology, it's because we see what it can help us accomplish. Mm-hmm. And frankly, some of the greatest achievements have come as a result of necessity, and I think that's kind of where we're at now too, is that we look at what our future potentially looks like, and we need science and technology to save us. I mean, for me personally, I always watched and loved science fiction.
Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Wars for me.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, I loved Next Generation. Saw every episode. And then started working on a show that was competing with it, so I kind of went with the third one, Stargate. I honestly, I never considered myself a sci-fi writer. I always was interested in character and what the story was, and if it happened to take place on a spaceship or involved aliens, then great. But what was the human story? What was it telling us about ourselves? And we always talked about Stargate as not being one genre. It was all of them. We could do anything any week, and it was the beauty of the show. Is you could do a comedy, you could do a horror, you could do a western, which we did a couple of times. I mean, it was just an ability and an ability to talk about serious issues in a kind of a safe space, because they were often allegory or told in a one step removed from reality. And so you could almost get away with saying certain things without it being quite so controversial as it is today. So that was always fun. It was a playground to play in, and for Stargate, we certainly had a lot of people helping us. We had consultants. We were affiliated with the Air Force because we actually had Air Force patches on the uniforms, and they not only provided technical support but a lot of equipment. They sent planes up for us all the time. They kind of considered the show a bit of a recruitment tool. You mentioned Top Gun. So we had several people from the Air Force on the show, including two chiefs of staff. One of them was a chairman at the time. I just loved the opportunity to tell stories that inspired people to want to solve their problems and have fun and escape, using their imaginations. And STEM was kind of a route to that. Mm-hmm. It was never the first driving force. It was what allowed the door to work.
Right. Oh, I love that. It allowed the door to work. Dr. José Morey, Dr. Intergalactic yourself, tell us about your journey. It's like, if you haven't seen them, they're amazing graphic novels that he's done, but you do so much. Talk about your journey to where you are.
Sure, and thank you very much for everybody for the opportunity to be there. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. Actually, giving a talk just a moment ago, keynote on Leonardo da Vinci here in Los Angeles. So arts and sciences, very much a part of everything that we do. My personal background is from the tech side. I'm a physician by formal training, so medical doctor, but I've worked in tech for the last 20 years. After medicine, I studied artificial intelligence, started working with IBM, developed a lot of, helped develop a lot of Watson applications in health tech, and that led to the opportunity to work in various industries as a consultant and as an executive at various levels. But throughout my journey being a Latino, I was originally born from Puerto Rico. My dad's Dominican, mother's Puerto Rican. I was born and raised on the island. We have a lack of diversity within science and technology across the board. And it keeps getting worse and worse as you go up the ladder. If you look at the executive level, the board level at most Fortune 500 companies, the representation of Latinos within those boards is 1.6%. 1.6% representation. So it just keeps getting worse as you kind of go through the ladder, and seeing the power that media has to really inspire kids from diverse backgrounds. Sid gave amazing examples of the benefits of edutainment, of education, and the power of embedding representation, how representation matters, and how we can actually move culture forward by the representation we have them. There's a lot of data behind that, but there's even amazing anecdotal stories, right? Mae Jemison, the first African-American astronaut, a woman astronaut, talked about how she saw Uhura on Star Trek. Simply having one diverse character on the show and motivated her and influenced her to find her passage into the stars. And you can do so much with that perspective. And we started about 2.5 years ago, a small little animation studio. We've been able to do a great series of books for kids 3 to 6. We're working on a comic, the Intergalactic Academy, but we've been able to work with Bert's team, not directly, but on La Primera Mujer, the first woman graphic novel, so we were able to do translations for that. We've been able to work with Space Racers, which is on Amazon right now for kids 3 to 6, 2 seasons of that. And we're working with other animation studios like Lion Forge to tell more diverse stories and have diverse protagonists, because if kids can see it, they can be it. And it's really about all diversity. We spoke about ethnicity, gender, but it's gender identity and disability, showing kids from multiple aspects. We have one of our books is Goodnight Little Veterinarian. The veterinarian has cochlear implants because he signs to the animals when speaking to them. Our latest little book, Goodnight Environmental Sciences, she's a Latina from Puerto Rico, but she also has a below-the-knee amputation. So depending on what she's doing, she puts on a different prosthetic. And it's really just about normalizing everyone and showing that science is for everybody. Sid talked about wealth generation, how science and STEM really was generating the greatest amount of generational wealth development in the history of humanity. And that is one aspect, is to make sure that equality from an income perspective is attained. But the other one is that the technologies that we're developing today can potentially perpetuate systemic inequalities or develop new inequalities. And if we don't have a diverse set of people that are working on these applications, then it's something that we can run into. There's a great documentary that's available right now called Coded Bias by Joy Bolini, an amazing PhD from MIT, where I talk about how artificial intelligence applications, specifically around facial recognition, was causing biases in software. And when they looked at all the engineers that were working at those applications, none of them came from a diverse background, either diverse in ethnicity or in gender. So it's important not just from an economic perspective, but from a systemic inequality perspective. And that's what we're looking to do, social impact, and to change the dynamic of who goes into science and technology.
Thank you so much. I think that is the one that leads me to this next question. I'm going to kind of do a little round robin. What is your plan, or what is your hope for how to use entertainment in the most positive of ways to create a science literate world? I mean that's the goal, right? To have people super curious and committed to a sense of lifelong learning. How do we do that, or what are your best laid plans, or what are your hopes?
I just think piquing interest, so just that little kernel, if you can just get them excited about one thing maybe in a book that, oh, genetic engineering, that's interesting, and then they follow up and what are we actually doing? How are we changing life on this planet? We are now able to do that, and how will that play out? So that's an example of like how that affects kids and makes them go on and learn.
Plant a seed. How about you, AJ?
I think for us, yes, we are into inspiring young people into action, but also I think we've seen enough of wizards and witches and enough magic, and the STEM fields are just a wonderful opportunity for us to put interesting obstacles on the screen and to have characters engage in some things that kids at home would find super interesting. Mm-hmm. So it's more difficult to do because you have to back it up with all of the facts. It's a little bit easier to make I don't want to say it's easier, but you can make a fantasy world out of your head. And if you wanted to have the same type of compelling narrative based in STEM, there's a lot of research that goes into that type of work. But those obstacles can be even more compelling than what you would encounter in a more fantasy type element. So we're really encouraged that it's an interesting story world we want to explore, period. And as a result, young people at home are going to be inspired to get involved in what they're seeing. So we start with the story first and the characters first. It's interesting in its own right, but a nice byproduct of that is going to be that kids are going to take, or young people are going to take an interest in wanting to pursue that stuff that they're seeing on screen.
Science. It's like magic, but it's real, right? How about you, Rob? Like when you set out to pitch a show, line run a show, shop a show, do you take into account for like how will this impact, or what will this feel like, or down the road children out there, families?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can, again, back to the idea that I think we are living in a society right now where maybe there is a little bit of a decline in interest in science, and necessity tends to bring us back to that. If you look at the recent pandemic, suddenly people became very interested in vaccine technology. Entertainment can lead in that way. We can lead in terms of representation. We were always very proud of the fact that for the last 2 decades on Stargate, the smartest person on the show was a woman, AJ and I are developing a show right now, which we're going to be taking to market, which is based on a series of books that written by an author named Douglas Meredith. It's called Generation Mars, and shows about a family living on Mars in the near future. And it's hard science. The problems, the challenges this family faces, and the problems everybody faces in terms of space travel, are real problems and solved by real science. I mean, I worked a long time on. I mean, we tried on Stargate to be as true as we could at the same time as we were dealing with certain amount of fantasy. I mean, our show was very much about the use of technology to kind of impersonate magic or gods. A lot of problems ended up getting solved story-wise by reversing the polarity of the phase capacitor. We used to call it technobabble. I mean, that was what it was. I don't like stories like that. I mean, those are a little easy. And I think while the science is important in certainly the show we're developing, what it comes down to is, why are people choosing to embrace that science? Why are people taking on the challenges? So why do you go to Mars? Why do you make the decision to live there? Why do you choose to have children there? Those are the questions that we need to answer from a human perspective. And then the problems of how do we breathe on Mars? How do we continue to sustain our lives there in every way? Those are the hard science answers that once we realize, hey, we're committed to this idea, science is what's going to make it possible.
Love all of that and every bit of what H2M is about. How about you, Bert? It's like I know you say that a project has to come to you funded, and there's definitely a pipeline for the product, but is there ever a consideration from NASA to say, how will this maybe push our messaging forward?
Definitely. I mean, I think it's really important for us to embrace subjects, but also embrace diversity and reaching out to the greater communities that are out there. I want to also say, sorry, I'm getting a call. Also, what's really, really important is being able to tell stories with people from diverse communities. I can give some really great examples. Halle Berry recently starred in Moonfall, a Roland Emmerich production that we participated in, and she played actually the director of NASA. We actually at NASA have our first African-American female director of the Johnson Space Center, Vanessa Weish, and just to be able to see these role models, not only in fiction, but in fact, can be really, really inspiring also for future generations. I think when you ask a lot of scientists and engineers at NASA why they actually pursued their careers, a lot of it has to do with what they've seen on television screens and also in theaters. People that basically spoke to them because they saw someone on the screen and they thought, I can be that person, right? And I think that's extremely important, especially as we propel forward, trying to bring in really new, amazing minds into space exploration. It's a wonderful way to reach people.
Beautiful. Tamara, you are often found on the red carpet for Marvel. Do you see, as you're out there maybe in the community talking to people, doing whatever outreach you're doing, do you find also that even Marvel has that capacity to pull people into some kind of science or STEM thought process?
Oh, not only do they have the capacity, they are actually doing it. And I just want to be clear, I do not officially speak for Marvel. I work a lot with them, but I need to make that very clear. This is me, Tamara, expressing my own opinions. Welcome to Hollywood, everybody. That said, Marvel has actually done some really incredible programs with various partners over the years, depending on who some of the characters are that are featured in their films. So like I know when they did Marvel Studios, Ant-Man and the Wasp, I forget if it was Ant-Man or Ant-Man and the Wasp, they had a nanotechnology contest that they did, and ultimately the winners were brought to Disney. I believe they had a day at Marvel, they came to the red carpet, they were mentored. So they've done several different contests like this and projects that have brought people into the world of STEM and connected the STEM on their screen, connected the STEM that's happening in the movies to what is happening in real life. So they're pretty serious about that, and I think it's great. There's Victoria Alonso, who's an executive producer of the Marvel movies, has been a really big proponent for STEM in general and especially girls in STEM. So I have to give a shout out to her. And I also just want to add to the conversation real quick that in addition to what everybody's already said, which I'm in complete and total agreement with, I think another ingredient right now for me personally in storytelling is some optimism. Obviously, climate is top of mind for so many of us right now. And Hollywood has a history of telling stories that are full of gloom and doom. And in part, it's because it's cinematic, right? It's cool to see like an iceberg shelf break on your big screen. It's, a lot more interesting than seeing somebody hunched over a thing, waiting for progress. But it can also make us feel really hopeless if all we see is the idea that it's inevitable that the planet's going to die and that humans are responsible for that. So without having just that proverbial technobabble fix and it all gets fixed with the push of a button, I think it's really important right now to find stories that represent what is possible or what could be possible and to push people in directions of thinking that. Because yes, if she can see it, she can be it, and we all need that representation, but we also all need to use our imaginations for what hasn't happened yet and what could happen. And that, I think, is where there's a really nice symbiotic relationship between folks working in the STEM fields and between storytellers, because as we have those conversations, it informs the stories that we can tell. And then as we're telling those stories, that in turn can then inspire folks working in STEM.
That's my hope, is that so much of this programming can inspire the next generation of explorers, but also the next generation of problem solvers. Dr. José, what do you say? What is your hope? What are the best programs or the things that you're wanting to, see more of? If you had your blue sky dream, what would that show look like?
Well, I think I'll reiterate so much of what has already been said and concur with so much of it. And I think we were almost alluding back to Arthur C. Clarke's, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, right? In talking about different aspects of creativity or storytelling, I think there's something very unique, specifically around space. Space has been something that has been very special in the human condition and in science in general, where it's something that really inspires everybody from all walks of life. And it's been, until recently, one of the very few things that we would work with all countries, regardless if we had any kind of issues with them, right? Space was the one place where we always came around and said, hey, this is for everybody. We need everybody and all hands on deck to kind of work together to accomplish these amazing things. I agree with Tamara that you can create stories that really uplift when there's so much negativity that is going around in the world, understandably so. But at its core, it's still, if they can see it, they can do it. I think that's a big aspect of trying to get kids to, because we see that kids from all walks of life, BIPOC, LGBT, girls, they all do the same, they do well and at equal levels up until like 4th and 5th grade. And then after that, everyone still does the same if you were to test, but people lose interest because they believe for different reasons that, my tribe isn't there, that I shouldn't be doing these kinds of things. And we lose amazing scientists or potential scientists that would be going on to do amazing things within STEM simply because they believe that they shouldn't be a part of that team of doing those things. And I think Sid mentioned, or someone mentioned earlier, perhaps AJ, about inspiring not just kids, but even inspiring adults. Science and STEM is for everybody, so getting people to transitioning into new STEM jobs is something that we need now more than ever to remain competitive at the global stage. Sid also showed all the data of where we stood, and it's very true, and we need to take advantage of being able to transition mid-career or late career into sciences, specifically for people that were disenfranchised, for decades, or perhaps pushed away from the sciences. Now it's a time that we can actually tell stories and bring them back into the fold, and I think that's very important. And I think the one thing I would add to everything that everyone has said is the fact that the people telling the stories also need to be diverse throughout the entire creation of that story. And that's something that's very important and that we do at Astra. All our writers come from diverse backgrounds, both from gender identity, ethnicity. Same thing with our illustrators and our 2D animators, our 3D animators, the PR folks that we use. Everyone comes from a diverse background, because if you're going to be telling stories about diverse individuals in different respects, and I believe the creators should be able to resonate with those stories that are being created.
Beautiful. I'm going to do something a little bit different. Nusaba, I cannot resist your hand, my love. Do you have a question? Yes. Do you want to come to the microphone, my love? You can stand and come right there. You might need some help lowering it. Come on over to the microphone. There you go, lovey. All right. Can somebody reach up there and help her? Thank you, Hashim. Oh yeah, you got it. But I like your impetus there. That's very brotherly.
There we go.
Thank you, love.
My question is that why do we need to build all these rockets and everything if we can make a tiny rover and see it through a camera?
Oh, that could be a problem that you put in Generation Mars, AJ.
Rob, you might be a good
That's
person
right.
to talk to that.
It's like, what do you think, Rob? It's like, if we can see it and all these things, it's like, that's a great question, sweetheart. But we kind of think that it would be fun to go. And while it's vastly interesting that we might see it through a rover's eyes, I kind of want to go. Maybe they'll send grannies to Mars by the time that we get humans there. But what do you say to that, Rob? Do you have any answers
to kind of poke a hole in what I do, we watch TV too much. We look at stuff on screens too much, and we kind of get the feeling like that's the only way to experience something. And there's really nothing like actually doing it. And, would you rather watch someone play baseball, or would you rather go and play baseball? I mean, I would rather play baseball. And I think, in terms of specifically Mars, as I said, part of the challenge of creating the show is to answer the question, like, why would we want to go to Mars? And,
Right.
and once we're there, why would we want to have children there? It all seems kind of crazy. And the answer is that, you know, when you have a challenge, when you set a big challenge out for yourself, sometimes the way to solve that is to exercise. Do what you need to do to prepare for that challenge, right? If you want to swim the length of a pool and you've never swum before, you don't go out there and try and swim all the way across the first time. You learn how to swim first. You train a little bit. You get really good at swimming. And then suddenly, you know, getting across that pool is not going to be so hard. That's the premise of the show, in a way, that we're trying to get across, is that in order to meet the challenges that we're going to have in the future, we need to train ourselves, we need to train the next generation to be, you know, smarter than the generation before. And the way to do that, and the way that we've done it in the past, is to basically set big goals for ourselves. And you know, rovers and cameras and robots can gather information for us to help us understand what we need to do to meet that challenge, but at the end of the day, we're going to have to jump in the pool and swim across it.
Yeah. And there's also plenty of research that it's like, you know, even as grand as spirit and opportunity and curiosity and sojourner truth and perseverance and all of these rovers are, it's like a human could traverse the amount of you know, distance they can go within a matter of days instead of a matter of years. So there is a bit of a call for humans to go. I want to open this up for any other questions, and I will come back to you panelists for anything you might want to add. But do we have questions about the development of a story, the illustrations, writing, directing, producing? Anybody want to open that up before we proceed any further? All right, come on down.
Robert and AJ, I'd love to ask, I love this, I mean, your show sounds brilliant, and I'm excited for it, and Stargate meant a lot to me, so I'm very excited by anything that you guys. Oh, it's amazing. Will that, maybe it's too early to say, but will the story on Mars also have a kind of metaphysical aspect? For instance, in Stargate, you had the ancients and things like that. Will you bring that in? And I'm fascinated by the idea that the arts can bring in, for lack of a better term, spirituality into hard science stories as well. Is that something you're working with, and how do you approach that?
I mean, human beings are you know, multifaceted creatures, right? And we find meaning in our lives a lot of different ways, and that includes art and music, and you know, definitely. I mean, look, our plan right now is to not have aliens and lightsaber battles and you know. But there are ways to bring elements that you're talking about into the show as well, and that are going to at the same time resonate, because there are things we're really going to have to deal with. You know, what does AI look like 20, 30 years from now? What does VR look like? How will that change our brains? How will that change our engagement with the tangible world versus our spirituality and what we believe in, or how we find pleasure? I mean, those are all things that I think can grow out of real hard science, but still, you know, explore the human spirit, right? Which is kind of why we're doing all these things. I mean, we invent robots for a lot of reasons. They do menial jobs that we don't want to do, or they may do jobs we can't do or are too dangerous for us to do. But then what do we do? You know, that's a question we have to sort of answer as we go forward. You know, what's the meaning of our life when the robots are doing all those other things?
AJ, you have any comments to add?
Well, Rob's the creator of this thing, so it's his world really that's coming together. But the hard science aspect of the show has been so important from the get-go in getting that right and working with experts such as yourselves on really bringing that world together and making sure that we're doing it authentically in the science as we understand it today. And one of the things that's important to me, because we're depicting young people in this show, it is about a family, and there's an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old girl, Earth years, and they are tasked with doing some rather impossible things, and they're the only people in that moment that can rise to the occasion to accomplish those goals. And we're not asking young people in the series to do anything that they're not physically capable of. They do possess the muscle mass to do it, but it's, do they have the courage, do they have the mental fortitude to rise to the occasion and accomplish what needs to get done in the moment, and do they have the prerequisite training required to accomplish that thing in the moment as well. And when you're in a settlement of thousands of people, children making up a portion of that, everybody needs to be equipped to accomplish what needs to get done on the day. So it's kind of a reverse of the helicopter parent in a way, is it's actually training the kids to be able to handle something really serious in the moment, as opposed to trying to insulate them and to protect them from anything dangerous all the time, because dangerous things are going to happen to them and they need to be prepared for it.
Or equipping them with the science-based physiological enhancements that will give them those abilities.
It was going to come back to $6 million man.
Well, yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be a bionic arm, you know, it can be a genetic modification. So there are other ways of essentially preparing people for difficult situations, you know, and science is going to change how we do that. And I think it's also interesting to explore the moral implications of that, and how we're going to make those decisions in the future.
Can I say to everybody that Explore Mars is working with you guys?
Absolutely, yeah.
So we're very delighted to announce that Explore Mars has been tasked with being a consultant for the Generation Mars show. If you haven't seen the books, you should really check them out. You can find them at any bookseller that's online. Doug's done a beautiful job of painting a landscape. And one of the conversations that I was asked recently about was, what will the school on Mars look like? And Doug addresses this, right? So I was at a symposium about what that will be. Think about it, kids won't be tasked to test. They will be tasked with the daily requirements. How's your biometrics? You know, what's going on? You know, what's the problem? If you have something go wrong with your suit, you'll have to fix it in the moment. So equipping critical thinkers, problem solvers, I think that's what I love about the series already, in the book series, is that these are kids who have to think, be able to keep their head while all about them is losing theirs, Kipling might say, and solve a real problem. And so I think that for me is the exciting part of this series, is that I hope that kids really hear that message throughout as you guys are moving forward. I see someone else. Yeah, Maggie, please, love.
For Miss Blue, what inspired you to fly?
What inspired me to fly? Well, when you get up in the sky, it's just this amazing bird's eye view of the world, and it kind of makes your problems seem so small, because you see the cars running around like little ants, and it just puts everything into perspective. And I had my first lesson on my 14th birthday, so that's quite a birthday present. But you can get a free flight with Young Eagles. There's 5,000 municipal airports all over the country, and pilots volunteer their time and their gas to take kids up in their airplanes just to share the love of flying with them. So you can look up Young Eagles through EAA and take a flight, and they'll even let your hands at the controls so you can see how amazing it is to be a master of the wind and sky.
Well, I have to brag on Maggie. She has already taken, yes, Tamara's clapping. She has already taken her first pilot's, she's taking classes, and was inspired when we had Wally Funk. Bert, I'm sure that NASA consulted with Mercury 13 in that documentary. Did you?
We did. We gave them footage, and we did participate in that, yes.
And so during the pandemic, Wally Funk came on and spoke to students via Zoom, and Maggie got really inspired. So it is that power of connection, and I think the power of exposure that kind of opens the doorway. Jose, I would love to ask you, do you have a favorite story of a kid that maybe has seen Dr. Intergalactic, and then you've heard this, or they've written you a note after, or do you have something where a kid said, thank you for inspiring me?
Yeah, so we get to, I'll say 2 projects. So there's one project that we're working with a nonprofit called Fundación Arbol. They're a foundation out of Mexico, and they work with rural communities, poorest of the poor in Mexico. What we're doing is we're taking the comic and we actually teach agricultural science, and we create a little quest for the kids to go on to learn about how to create greenhouses and how to do local farming. And we'll send them little messages. We have a little animation where it makes it look like, I'm in space floating around, and I'll dress up like Dr. Galactic. And we'll send them on their missions, and the kids will write back to Dr. I to give them reports on the missions and how they're learning so much and how they love what they're doing. And what it does for the communities, right now we're doing about 100 families, and we're looking to expand to about 2,000 families. They will grow enough sustainable food to feed their own family. And then we will also help them, after they pass the first mission, teach other local families to grow their own vegetables, and we give them chickens as well and help them cultivate eggs. And anything that is produced in excess, they actually sell to local farmers markets and restaurants in Mexico City to provide them sustainability. And now they're talking about kids that had never conceptualized about space at all, are now talking about, hey, I would love to be an astronaut when I grow up. So it's pretty cool.
That's really awesome. We have another question. Lucas.
I'm not sure whose name it is, but it's for the guy who's making the documentaries.
Oh, that's Bert. So that's the question for Bert.
Yes. What was the first documentary that you helped make, and what made you want to start doing documentaries?
Yeah, so what was the first documentary maybe that you consulted on, Bert? Do you remember?
Oh my God.
I know at 198 a year, it's hard to remember, right?
Yeah, I would think, looking back, I think In the Shadow of the Moon was a really wonderful documentary about Apollo astronauts. Astronauts that were moonwalkers that actually went to the moon, that really explored. And it was looking behind the scenes and talking to them about their experiences in a real personal sort of manner. And it humanized the astronauts. Sometimes astronauts seem like they should be a statue, or they should sort of be in a museum, and that they should be on a pedestal. But this really humanized these big giants of space exploration, like Mike Collins and Buzz Aldrin and all the rest of them that have sort of, been in the hallowed halls of history. So, documentaries like that, but there's so many documentaries that have been wonderful to work with. So that's one that stands out as an early one.
Sure, thank you. Do we have any further questions? Oh, do you have something else, Lucas?
No, I'm just saying thank you.
Thank you, love. Although
Thank you,
I will
Lucas.
say that Lucas would really like to build a theme park on the moon or Mars. So if you guys can incorporate that bit, he's the guy to talk to right there. All right, any other questions? Rosie.
Hi, Rosie with Explore Mars. First of all, I just want to say, AJ, I am a product of the Disney Channel. Twitty was one of my first crushes. So I was very happy to see you here, as well as Bob, Stargate. All of sci-fi really is a huge inspiration on why I became a science communicator. Probably the main inspiration. But also I had a question for Bert and probably most of you. Getting into the field of consulting so I'm huge in just pulp culture, film, sci-fi, like I said. As a science communicator, what is the career path to get into movie consulting and getting into the industry, from bridging from science communication to entertainment to helping on film, helping, create these stories that are realistic as well as educational?
Who would like to take that one?
I think it was directed at Bert.
Anyone.
Yeah, I think everyone has their own path. I have a really sort of more artsy background than like a science background. I actually studied history and then studied international relations, but I also went to art school. So you just never know the path that life brings you. I'd always been interested in movies. I think I was a member of the American Film Institute at a very early age, at like 11 or something. And that love for movies eventually became my profession. And I think if you just kind of work in different areas, do the best you possibly can, and sort of try to figure out, is this working for me? And hopefully then you can have some luck. It's a tough industry, quite frankly, and to find a consulting job is not always the easiest thing. You just have to be open to what you can find. And then as you sort of learn, you kind of find your way.
Tamara?
Yeah, I've got one other, I've got another suggestion for you, and echoing what Bert was saying, nothing in entertainment ever has just one path. We're all sort of entrepreneurs inventing our own careers. That said, I don't know what your background is, but if you do actually have a science degree background, there is a nonprofit called the Science and Entertainment Exchange, which is a program of the National Academies of Sciences. It's not going to help you get a paying job as a science consultant, because what their service actually is offering free consultations to writers and directors and showrunners who have projects and need science or STEM consults and advice. That said, it can potentially be a way into the industry so you can get some experience doing that. If your background is in the arts, that's not going to help you because they do need degreed scientists, but it might be one thing for you to look into.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, one thing that it was Rosie, right? Yeah. One thing I often mention to young people, we work with a lot of interns and young people starting out in the industry, and you're doing just this right now, which is once you know what it is that you want, just communicating that to anybody that will listen, and doors will start to open up. The things will start to get connected of, oh yeah, I met Rosie. She wanted to be a science consultant on this thing, and we have this one problem. Maybe she would know the answer to it. And before you know it, you're just kind of integrated into that path, and doors will continue to open. So regardless of what it is that you want to do, when you know what it is and you tell somebody else about it, doors will start to open up.
Beautiful. Anybody else want to build on that? Ivey, I think you've got a question. Come on, love.
I have a question for Miss Tamara. When you were, when you got into space, was there anyone who encouraged you, or did they all just say since you liked theater, you couldn't really do space stuff?
Well, my dad definitely encouraged me. I think he would have been happy had I put the arts behind me and gone on to what he considered a quote-unquote stable job. But my very first job on screen was actually in Star Trek First Contact, and my dad's a total Trekkie. So I think once he saw me on the big screen in his favorite franchise, he was like, all right, I'm good with my daughter being an actress. That said, yeah, it was really hard to forge a path that allowed me to combine the two things I love, which are the arts and science, and especially space. I don't know if anyone can tell, I'm actually wearing James Webb Telescope earrings. So ultimately, I am thankful that I had parents who were supportive. I had a couple of teachers who were supportive. I think educators play such an important role. And I think part of the idea as an educator is really to never make somebody feel like they can't do something. If a student has a passion for something, find a way to support them, whatever their path in might be.
Beautiful, thank you.
Also, I have to just give a shout out, to Janet, because if we're talking about people who support young people's dreams, Janet is an incredible supporter. Sorry to embarrass you, but I just have to do it. What she did, especially over the pandemic, with reaching out to students, creating new virtual ways, new platforms for students to engage with scientists and folks, especially on the space side of things, is really inspirational, and it's a good model for people to look at.
Thank you very, very much. Ivey, did you have something else?
Thank you.
Ivey says thank you. And I thank you. Any other questions? Can somebody give me the time? I realized I walked out. What time do you have?
2 minutes till.
It's 5 till.
Well, bam, my inner metronome does indeed work. I was counting down. Any last questions for our panel? And we'll do a quick round robin. All right. So give me 3 words, your hope for space science, entertainment, etc. So 3 words to kind of encapsulate what you hope this industry can do for the future of science.
Inspire togetherness and connectedness.
All right. AJ.
More optimism, please.
Like it. Rob.
I'm not a 3-word guy.
Well, you know what? Since you didn't give us the furlings, give us your paragraph on this.
Boy. Yeah, I mean, look, it's about inspiration, you know. It's about inspiring people to do better. And that's the sort of motto of Doug's book, too, and of the Generation Mars patch is, you know, do better.
He got it down to 2. All right, Bert. 3 words to describe what you hope that STEM and entertainment does.
Outreach is reaching out as much as possible out there in the world and in the universe. Inclusion involve a lot of people from different backgrounds, and I echo what Rob just said, basically inspiration.
Tamara.
I would say entertain, imagine, and hope.
Dr. Morey.
Diversity, equity, inclusion. Science is for all.
I want to say thank you to this esteemed panel. Again, give them a big round of applause. I'm going to let you guys go ahead and exit.